Good evening, and welcome to tonight's Creepy Time Theater presentation of Night of the Hare, an original Tale from the Pizzaplex written and produced by yours truly. So, sit back, get comfortable, and try to ignore that suspicious shadowy mass in the corner of your room. I give you Night of the Hare.
Hey, watch it, stupid head! TJ Ronford jolted as something collided with his thigh. He looked down to see a kid of about 8 weave around him and frantically take off. His pudgy friend huffed and puffed after him, a half-melted chocolate bar in his fist. For a moment, TJ glared after them, imagining lasers shooting from his eyes and piercing their spines. Then he sighed and looked back ahead, taking in the vast space before him. So, he thought sardonically, this is where it all ends. 8 p.m. on a Friday night ought to be spent at a club or a bar. Hell, he'd settle with just being home alone with a good movie. But instead, he was at Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex, applying for a position as, what else? A nightguard. See where reform school and a GED gets you? He chirped, in a nasally, high-pitched imitation of his mother. Miserable wretch, he growled in his own voice. Like you ever gave a rat's at... He blinked and readjusted his focus, seeing that a young woman with 2 kids was staring at him as though he'd just materialized into the room. He grunted and walked past them, scanning for where he was supposed to go. Employee lockers, he muttered, striding hesitantly up towards the main stage. Where are you at? It was smack in the middle of a performance. The band was powering through an upbeat rock ballad that blasted through the various speakers mounted around the room. It was much too loud, almost enough to make TJ wince, but the kids seemed not to mind, bouncing in their seats or rushing at the stage, held back by barricades and a cavalry of hassled staff members. TJ only gave the characters a passing glance as he meandered to the northwest corner. The glam rock iterations, as the TV commercials had dubbed them, were much too garish and modernized for his taste. Kids these days had no idea what Freddy's used to be. The long, troubled, yet iconic legacy it touted. Those old characters had, well, character, aesthetics, longevity. He traded a dozen of these shiny, fully articulated cyborg posers for one of the original animatronics, back in the days of jerky movements, simple endoskeletons, and felt fur of muted hues that always seemed charmingly worn. Another kid, a little girl this time, shoved past him to run up to the stage. Back in the days of all those murders, he reminded himself. Maybe he'll come for you next, he added, staring laser beams at the girl too. But she was oblivious, jumping up and down at the foot of the barricades while the staffers eyed her warningly. I'd say we're about due for another round of killings, he snickered. But he perished the thought and quickened his pace, thinking back to the interview, in the loosest sense of the word, that got him this position. Tyler James? The fat grease bag behind the desk had asked, not even looking at him when he opened the door labeled HR. Yes, sir, TJ said. You're late. Let me pull up your file. TJ frowned. His interview time was at 7 p.m. and his watch read 7 p.m. He immediately thought that Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex lacked the dignity to justify the "if you're on time, you're late" adage, but he decided not to bring that up during the interview. Mr. Greasebag clacked at his boxy computer. TJ lingered in the doorway, unsure what to do. There were no chairs in the office aside from Mr. Greasebag's own. Close the door and stand over there, please, Mr. Greasebag ordered, waving a hand to the front of his desk. TJ obliged. The rock music from outside deafened as the door clicked shut. He stood in place, watching the man press keys. He felt stupider for every moment that passed, standing there like a worthless, futureless idiot, while the land whale before him typed away. You writing an essay or something? TJ thought after nearly 10 minutes had passed. Catching a glimpse at the screen, it seemed Mr. Greasebag was going through the candidate info page about TJ himself, which had put a heavy emphasis on criminal record when he'd initially applied. Why go through it here when you went through it in plenty enough detail during the application phase? He wondered next. Can you lift 25 pounds or more? Mr. Greasebag finally said. Yes, sir, TJ replied. knowing for sure he had marked yes on his application. Click, clack, click, clack. This went on for another 5 minutes. A bullet, my skull. Just make it quick. Your uniform, Mr. Greasebag denoted, waving a hand at a shrink-wrapped folded set of clothes sitting on his desk. Your shift starts tomorrow at 9. The other night guard will train you. Welcome to Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex, where fantasy and fun come to life. Thank you, said TJ stiffly, grabbing his uniform. And just like that, the interview for the first and only job of his life had commenced. The male employee locker room was dingy and beige with flickering fluorescent lights. TJ sat broodingly on a wooden bench, his night guard uniform bunched up in his arms like an unwanted infant. As the minutes trickled away and 9 p.m. drew closer, other Pizzaplex staffers milled in and out of the locker room, stripping their burgundy uniforms in favor of their street clothes. One young man gave TJ a knowing look before departing. Clearly he was bound to make the most of his Friday, turning over his day shift for a night on the town. Yeah, don't give me your pity, TJ muttered. The analog clock on the wall read 8:45. No better time to suit up, I guess. TJ laid the uniform on the bench, a white button-down shirt with black pants, tie, and a cap. A laminated ID card stuck out from the front pocket. Tyler James Ronford, security. He gave another sigh, lifting the shirt, wondering who the other night guard training him would be. Something small and hard slipped from a fold in the shirt and fell to the floor. TJ scowled and bent over to examine it. The object was about the size of his knuckles and wrapped in plastic, but the color scheme was instantly familiar to him. A Fazwatch? TJ's pulse quickened as he picked it up and examined its front. Sure enough, the display screen and decorative top hat were diagnostic of a Fazwatch. He had read about these gadgets on local tech forums, how they were bestowed to staffers and special VIP guests, but what had interested him the most was the talk about workarounds. Maybe this job won't be a total waste, he postulated, turning over the Fazwatch in his hands. The clock on the wall blared 8:50 at him. Shit, he spat, undressing and donning his night guard outfit. The new clothes were starchy and scratchy on his skin as he shambled out of the locker room, like he was wearing an animal hide. Strapping the watch to his wrist, he headed for the escalators leading to the atrium. Although the Pizzaplex didn't close until midnight, the last of the straggling families were making their way to the exits. Only a few young adults hung back, huddled on benches and corners, savoring the solitude a little too much. From the top railing, TJ spied a 20-something couple, their mouths glued to each other, hands dancing friskily across each other's bodies. A pang of jealous longing twinged in his chest. Get a room, he said lowly, in a vain attempt to dismiss it. Descending to the lower floor, TJ scanned the atrium for another black and white clad staffer. Within moments, he spotted the other night guard milling about the main stage. He strode over to him. Please, God, don't be some humorless old fart who takes his job too seriously, he prayed. But as he neared the stage, he halted with a little gasp. The night guard was no old fart. She was a young woman, no older than 25, with straw-colored hair in a ponytail and dazzling green eyes. Oh, TJ thought, stepping onto the stage. If she's my coworker, then this job definitely won't be a waste.
I take it you're the new guy,
she said, turning to meet him.
Welcome to Freddy's.
Yep, that's me, said TJ, trying to put on a smile. His left cheek spasmed, no doubt the result of his lips contorting into the sick sideways slash of a grin that others had, on more than one occasion, deemed creepy. Damn it, he silently cursed. Strike one. The woman reached out to shake his hand.
Vanessa.
Tyler James, he replied, accepting the gesture. Friends call me TJ. So, he attempted confidence once more. What do your friends call you? Vanessa stared up at him, unimpressed. He looked away sheepishly, letting go of her hand. Strike two, he rued.
Have you activated your Fazwatch?
Vanessa asked, motioning to his wrist. What, do you just turn it on? TJ asked, bringing it closer to his face.
You should have a unique code on the backside of your ID card,
she explained. TJ looked, saw the code, and tapped his Fazwatch. A numbered keypad appeared on the tiny screen, and he typed his number. Welcome, the watch read for a split second before reverting to the main menu.
You can access every camera in the Pizzaplex if you want to scope a room,
said Vanessa.
You can also talk to any other staffer with a Fazwatch. Write down notes and messages. It's really just a little tablet for your wrist.
Did you know you can hack into these things? TJ blurted. You pull up the homepage and tap the... He faltered at the venomous look on Vanessa's face. Never mind, he murmured.
Why would I do that?
She asked, head cocked with scrutiny.
As a Fazbear Entertainment employee?
Never mind, he repeated louder. And strike 3.
Uh-huh. I got the second and third floors. You have the first. Learn every room, every corner, make a path and stick with it. This is also yours,
she added, thrusting a spare flashlight into his grasp.
See you at 5 a.m.
And with that, she turned and headed off for the escalators. TJ watched her disappear behind the upper level's railings. Well, that went well. But first impressions were almost never perfect. And TJ wasn't just motivated by shallow attraction. Yes, she was stunning, but a connection with this girl might lead to a relationship where they go in on a new place all to themselves. And, privately, a financially valid excuse to move out of his mother's house. At 27, he knew he had overstayed his welcome, and it wasn't like his bitch of a mother was giving him any reason to stay. Unfortunately, the novelty of the Fazwatch and the rush of a potential girlfriend was stifled by the long drag of the night shift. It took a surprisingly short amount of time to map out the first floor, and before midnight TJ had mentally charted his entire zone. Then it was a constant cycle of back and forth, while the hours limped onward and sleep pulled at his eyelids. On the occasions he passed by the escalators, he looked up to try and see Vanessa again, but other than the sporadic glint of her flashlight reflecting off some distant surface, she remained out of sight. "Get a hold of yourself," he said, smacking the side of his head. It was 2 a.m, and the nocturnal atmosphere was putting thoughts in his head. The muted purple glow of the Pizzaplex's nighttime lights was oddly stimulating, reminiscent of the clubs he'd frequented in the past, the very air he breathed oozing with sensuality. He loved those places. He never scored at one, but the scent was there, the tease, the promise of carnal desire. He thought back to the last girlfriend he had, a goth chick in his sophomore year of high school. TJ had been shadowy and awkward his whole life, but his high school years had been absolute misery. Repressed and ravaged with hormones he had kept to himself, yet that had only encouraged jokes about the quiet kid and the taboo stigmas associated with it. Nina must have seen something in him that wasn't there, maybe the soul of a wounded artist or some bullshit like that, and taken him in. It didn't take long for Nina to renege on her apparent attraction to him. That incident under the bridge. In the decades since high school, newfound diet and exercise had caused TJ to unfurl and bulk up with muscle. He still had that shady complexion about him, but from the neck down, as far as he was concerned, he was one of those marble statues from ancient history. He looked good. No honest woman could deny that. And with Vanessa, it's no different, he thought. Despite the brevity of their first encounter, he had imbibed in her physical features. The splash of freckles across her chiseled cheeks, thin and curvy in the proper places. She was beautiful, too good to just let go. To go free. He snapped out of it and checked his Fazwatch. It was only 2:05. He groaned. He still hadn't probed the extent of what he could do with the Fazwatch's workarounds. Admittedly, he was scared to try it, partially because he feared he'd mess something up, and partially because Vanessa's disapproval had rattled him. "I need a plan," he concluded, continuing to stalk the atrium. "You've been roaming dark roads your whole life. Time to find a new path." Day 1 had been miserable. TJ spent most of Saturday sleeping, waking up late afternoon to prepare dinner and get ready for his next shift. "You'd think sleepless nights would be worth more than $12 an hour," he later commented to his mother over the evening's meatloaf.
Nah.
His mother scoffed, not even looking at him.
A job for losers and dropouts deserves a wage for losers and dropouts.
"Thanks, Mom," said TJ bitterly. The old woman sniffed and dug into her meatloaf. "Great talk! Thanks for the support!" TJ called as he left through the door in a huff. If she answered him back, he didn't hear it. An hour later, he was in uniform, clocked in and ready to begin his day 2 shift. "This is life," he recited, like some self-deprecating mantra. "This is your life now." The Pizzaplex's lights dimmed as he resumed his path, scanning the various food stands, nooks, and crannies for anything out of the ordinary. It was only day 2, but somehow he suspected that the Pizzaplex's security measures were too tight for anything to seriously go wrong. He wasn't stupid. He knew fully well his position was just a redundancy. At 1 a.m., TJ was bored out of his skull, the ambiance simultaneously lulling him to sleep and inspiring more lascivious trains of thought. "Shit," he growled, shaking his head like a horse shooing flies. "Stay awake. Find something to do." He looked up at the higher level. He hadn't seen Vanessa's flashlight beam in a while. It would be prudent to try and look for her, just to keep a tab on his fellow nightguard. Sure, he could just check the cameras on his Fazwatch, but he preferred more solid confirmation, you know? He braced himself and nearly ran up the escalator to the 2nd floor. Roxy Raceway was to the west. It wasn't due to open to the public for another several months, so the whole area was just a maze of crates, tires, and asphalt tracks. It was dark even in the gloom. It reeked of rubber and scorched metal. "Anyone can get lost in here," he concluded, carefully navigating the obstacles. "I'm just doing my duty as a responsible coworker." "Vanessa?" he called out. He aimed his own beam up like a spotlight. "Hello?" Squeezing past a pile of crates, he suddenly emerged in a barren clearing next to the far wall, with his staircase and a conspicuous red door flanked by scaffolding. A chain-link fence blocked it off, but its gate had been swung open. TJ paused and shined his flashlight over it. Construction at the Pizzaplex had concluded months earlier. Were there still renovations to be made? From what he could tell, the door led to a lower level, but he saw no signs of expansion on the 1st or ground floors. Underneath the place, then? He steadied his beam and approached.
"Hey, who are you?"
TJ yelped, nearly dropping his flashlight. He spun around to find a hulking, clanking figure behind him, cloaked in shadow, but its wide, plasticky eyes glowed yellow, boring through him like coals. Flicking the beam upward revealed a mane of white hair and a muzzle of razor-sharp teeth. The canine keyboardist, Roxanne Wolf. TJ seethed, backing away from the animatronic, his heart racing. In the daylight, Roxy appeared gaudy and silly, not the least bit threatening. But tonight, with her gaping jaw and bulging, vacant stare, she was monstrous, almost uncanny.
"This area is for winners only,"
she scolded, taking a plodding step forward. Her distorted voice was like an amplifier blasting in his face.
"You don't look like a winner. You look like a loser. A loser and a creep."
Shut up! TJ stammered, completely oblivious to the fact that he was yelling at a punk rock robot wolf.
"Get lost,"
Roxy continued.
"I'm a winner, see my prize. You're a loser who sits and cries."
Shut up!
What is going on here?
TJ turned around again and his eyes met a blinding light. He threw a hand in front of his face, but he could still recognize Vanessa standing there, sandwiching him between herself and Roxy.
"Newbie,"
she said.
"what are you doing on this floor? You're supposed to be patrolling the level below."
Despite the sensory overload in his eyes, he could still feel the chill of Roxy looming behind him. "Could you please send her away?"
"Roxanne, get out of here.
Vanessa commanded.
I'm handling this."
"Who are you, big girl now?"
said Roxy snidely, but she pivoted and lurched off into the maze of crates with a huff.
"She's only aggressive to strange adults.
Vanessa explained.
That's another reason why you stick to your level.
She continued, her eyes narrowing accusingly.
So, why are you up here?"
TJ shrugged half-heartedly. "I got bored. My zone was clear, so I just decided to check out other places." Which was only half true.
"You stay where you're supposed to,"
Vanessa urged, prodding him in the ribs with her flashlight.
"I don't want to have to write you up, or to have you get hurt on my watch."
"Fair enough," said TJ, a strange twinge in his chest. She motioned in the direction of the escalators.
"Now get out of here. The night's still young."
"You got it," TJ muttered, turning and stalking off back into the crate maze. "God damn, she's got spirit." Normally, such a hostile interaction would have put a man off. But not him. It was exciting. His darkest romantic fantasies often invoked visions of risky quarries, of pursuits as dangerous for the hunter as the hunted. Oh yes, she was worth it. And, he realized as he descended to his zone and resumed patrolling, he had something on her. A secret she didn't even know she'd revealed. On his day 3 shift, TJ patrolled his zone in brimming silence, waiting for the last of the guests to clear out. And at the stroke of midnight, he caught sight of Vanessa passing by the escalators again. He ascended them, taking 3 steps at a time, his flashlight swinging wildly. She heard him approaching and turned to meet him.
Okay, what is it this time?
She demanded, immediately on guard.
Is there a reason you keep trying to find me in my zone?
Tonight there is, said TJ, out of breath from the sudden exertion. I want to know about that red door, beyond Roxy Raceway. Her face flickered.
Some contractors are doing work on the building's foundation. Otherwise, I don't have the clearance or purview to enter it, so it's none of my business. And none of yours, for that matter.
She added. Mm-hmm, TJ replied, smugness inflating in his chest. No purview to enter it, huh? Then explain last night.
What do you mean?
I didn't see you anywhere around before Roxy accosted me. Way I see it, the only way you could have ended up right behind me in that moment is if you'd come through that red door. Vanessa's lips pursed.
What's it to you?
She said, straightening up in defiance. Oh, nothing. Which was another half-truth. If you've got secrets, that's none of my business either, but I want to show you a secret of my own, if you'd let me. Vanessa didn't respond, but she kept her gaze locked on him. TJ held out his Fazwatch. I misspoke before. You can't really hack into these things, but you can set them to admin mode. There's a special sequence you can press. Some ex-Pizzaplex staffer said so on a tech forum. Look. He pressed the home button on his watch, displaying the main menu. He then tapped the tiny settings icon 13 times in rapid succession. Vanessa watched him with interest. There we go, he said. A tiny red admin text box had appeared in the upper right corner of the display. Now you can't just access the cameras, you can control them. He pointed to a distant CCTV camera mounted on the far wall. He pulled up its ID on his watch and pressed a button. And sure enough, the camera slowly swiveled around until it was facing the wall.
Whoa. Holy crap.
Vanessa whispered.
That's really something.
Now you can do whatever you want without the risk of the camera seeing you, said TJ with a smile. Vanessa's flashlight was pointing down, but TJ could still see a spark in her eyes. He almost sensed gears turning in her head.
Well, to be honest with you,
she said.
I've always wanted to try one of those Fazbears, but I'm never here except for when I'm on the clock.
Faz what? TJ exclaimed. There's alcohol here?
Well, sure,
said Vanessa with a smirk.
Gotta give the parents some reason to stick around. I'd nab one myself, but there's a security camera right there by the booth.
TJ tapped his watch. They looked at each other and smiled. Score, he thought. The Faz Beverages booth was nestled away in a corner beyond the rest of the food stalls on the first floor, unnoticeable by the kids, yet able to be found by any adults pining for a buzz. TJ and Vanessa approached methodically, trying not to appear too eager. They swept their flashlights around, exuding a guise of due diligence. They stopped a short distance from the booth. The only light within it was the bluish glow of a see-through refrigerator, its shelves stocked with brown glass bottles.
We're just out of range now,
said Vanessa, pointing to the camera mounted near the booth.
Do your thing.
TJ smirked as he accessed the camera with his Fazwatch. Slowly, as not to appear unnatural, he panned the camera to the right until it was facing the wall. He cued her with a twitch of his neck. Vanessa strode over to the booth and hopped over the countertop. He heard the clink of bottles. There was the briefest flicker of light. Then she re-emerged, arms held out, 3 bottles of Fazbear dangling from each hand, dripping with condensation. Her face broke into a devious grin. TJ inhaled sharply. It was one of the most glorious sights he had ever seen.
Let's make the most out of this.
6 Fazbears and 90 minutes later, the two had ended up in the West Arcade's karaoke rooms, blasting the day's top 40 songs on top volume, singing their drunken off-key renditions into the microphone. TJ was never a good vocalist. His own mother had claimed he had the pitch of a sea cucumber, but the alcohol had washed away his inhibitions, and he easily imagined himself an occult rock star, strutting about a candlelit stage in corpse paint for the reveling, black-clad masses. Of course, some small, sober part of him knew he was just singing poorly for Vanessa in a cramped, bright room, but somehow that felt just as good. When Vanessa sang, she was only slightly better. TJ might have actually found himself listening to her voice on the radio, some of the time. Those long, high notes would be the bane of her music career. He was surprised the glass screens on the arcade machines hadn't shattered, but there was passion in her movements, graceful and swaying, matched only by her smoldering eyes and full, shiny lips. He clapped and whooped at the end of every one of her songs, and the icing on the cake was the fact that he could simply wipe the user data from the karaoke machines with his Fazwatch's admin mode. No one would ever know. What was once a dead-end job for a social outcast had become an opportunity only God could have carved out.
Thank you. You've all been wonderful.
Vanessa slurred, stumbling back to the couch.
I'd like to thank my agent, my manager,
She plopped down next to him.
and all my adoring fans.
Am I really doing this with a music star right now? Said TJ, all his dignity having been guzzled down with the beer.
You've got the VIP access, you lucky man.
Vanessa purred, wrapping him in a hug. The two lowered onto their sides, cuddling into each other, hands and limbs interlocking. I'm dreaming. I'm going to wake up in some dark corner on the first floor, TJ thought, but it all felt much too real. I'd love to know you, Vanessa, he whispered.
In what way?
She breathed back. Every way. A long pause. She stretched out, emitting a sultry breath.
I'm pretty sure there's some policy against coworker relations.
Well, you've shown a deep disregard for workplace policies so far, TJ observed. Let me in, like you in that red door.
That's a big secret right there.
She teased, playfully jabbing him with her elbow.
Some other time. Maybe. But it's your turn now. Tell me more about you.
A nerve twitched in his stomach. You don't want to know about me, he said.
Try me.
Vanessa goaded.
I've been through a lot too. Why not let yourself in?
TJ sighed. Dredging up those unsavory bits from the past was never a pleasant experience. But the night's circumstances had loosened his tongue, and Vanessa had already invited him in. He just had to make his way deeper. You know, I was never exactly captain of the football team, he started. I always kept to myself. Never spoke up in class. My participation grade was shit. Yeah, they actually graded us in participation. They just assumed I was shy or lazy. He gulped. They didn't know the half of it. They didn't know what happened at home. They didn't know about Robbie. I was 6 at the time. Robbie was 6 too. 6 months, I mean. Just a baby. But he got whooping cough. That's my earliest memories, Vanessa. The rattles and chokes of my baby brother constantly from the other room. And his face. The kid coughed so much his eyes turned red. And the bags under his eyes looked like a goddamn raccoon's mask. It was disgusting. I hated looking at him and hearing those noises. I tried to love him, Vanessa, but I couldn't. I was 6. How could a 6-year-old feel love for something like that? And then, I don't remember, but one day his face was blue and he wouldn't wake up from his nap. We were just about to take him into the hospital. It was too late. I had no idea I was looking at a corpse in a crib, Vanessa. He wasn't coughing anymore, and all I could think was, thank God he finally stopped. That's what spurned my father to leave. It was just too much for him, I guess. There was a lot of fighting back in those days. My name came up a lot, but Mom defended me. It cost her a few black eyes, but she stuck with me. And I think she regrets it, Vanessa. She doesn't love me anymore. There's nothing left inside her. Telling his story was like vomiting up black oil. It poured out incessantly, spilling out into the open air and stinking up the room. But this was an episode he'd have to endure. That's not even the worst thing, though. I was 10, riding my bike around the neighborhood. It was empty and quiet, except for this little dog. One of those ratty things with the bows in its ears. They're barely dogs, you know. Their owners think they're people, for God's sake. But anyway, I was going downhill. The dog was on the curb, yapping its head off. We locked eyes. I felt such hatred for that dog. How dare it bark at me, just trying to enjoy my ride. Again, I made sure I was alone. No one was outside. I looked at her again, gripped the handlebars. I turned ever so slightly. You ever go over a speed bump too fast and you're tossed around the car? It was like that. I was nearly bucked off my bike, but I could feel the compression. And of course it started crying. It was worse than the yapping. I braked, turned around, watched it bleed. It only took a few minutes. It writhed in the road, still crying. But that stopped real quick. Even the breathing went away in no time. I remember looking around. Absolutely no one came out, not even the owners. I pushed my luck and waited, just 10 feet from this road-killed lapdog on the side of the road. Then I pedaled off, looped the neighborhood, went back home. Mom made me a grilled cheese sandwich and asked me how my ride was. Fine, I said. Never heard about the dog after that. Never got in trouble. As the days turned to weeks, I realized I had gotten away with it. And I didn't mind it. I sound like a fucking psychopath right now, Vanessa. I'm so sorry. But I've been around death my whole life and it's just been a part of me. I killed lizards and bugs in the backyard. It affected me. I dropped out of high school because it was just so distracting. Being around all that death and just not giving a rat's ass. I think about it all the time. It bothers me that it doesn't bother me. Oh God, please don't hate me, Vanessa. She had been silent the whole time. Her arms remained locked around him, but they had been motionless, passionless. TJ swore at himself, cursing the drink that had forced all that filth out of him. Vanessa, I'm sorry. Her arms curled tighter around him.
Don't be sorry,
She finally said.
You're just ahead of the curve.
A wave of dizziness overcame TJ. He felt as though he was tumbling through a void, despite laying flat on a couch. What? Vanessa turned to look at him. Her eyes were like emerald pools, and he was submerged in them.
You found at a young age that things die, and you learned a bit later about the fragility of life, and you became a master of fate.
TJ was relieved that she wasn't repelling him, but the fresh unease was strange and pulling. I don't understand.
All it took was a flick of the handlebars to bring that ratty little dog's life to an end. You were the Grim Reaper. You took its life on your own terms. That's power beyond what most people can even comprehend.
She shifted herself, flipping TJ onto his back. She laid a hand on his cheek. They were so close their eyelashes were brushing.
And I find that enthralling.
Their lips met, and everything shattered. Hands and fingers ran up and down each other's bodies as they writhed about in sensual bliss. TJ's heart pounded, pumping hot blood with such vigor it was almost nauseating. I am death. I'm the Grim Reaper, he thought darkly, amid their ravenous kissing. Your soul is mine. Vanessa suddenly unplugged from him, her eyes wild.
I want to know you too. I want to show you the real me, who I am. Under this suit.
She picked at her shirt with a suggestive smile. TJ nearly choked at the not-so-veiled implication. Oh my god. Yes,
You just have to do one thing for me.
she continued.
I want you, my beautiful bringer of death, to take the life of a child.
Electricity shot through TJ's chest. What?
A child.
Vanessa repeated.
One little soul. One that won't be missed. Then I'll let you in, and I'll show you the treasures beyond that red door.
Vanessa, Something unpleasant squirmed in his stomach. Some emotional twitch that struggled against his hardened heart. I could never.
Shh.
She pressed her chest into his.
That's just your limitations talking. I know you're better than that.
TJ's eyelids fluttered. He could feel her pulse on his ribs. I am better than that. Vanessa slid off him like a snake. He felt cold and bare without her. Standing over him, backlit by the harsh fluorescence of the karaoke room, she resembled some dark, avenging angel.
When you get him, bring him to the water pumps in the basement. Then you're done. I'll take it from there.
What? How am I supposed to pull this off, Vanessa? She bent over and stroked his cheek.
You tell me. After all, you are the Grim Reaper.
It was 6:30 a.m. by the time TJ staggered through his own front door. His head ached something fierce, whether it was from the beer, the late hours, or the sheer insanity Vanessa had saddled him with earlier that morning, or some combination of the three. He was loath to determine. One little soul. Ending a human life was cataclysmic. Some forbidden breach fellow people were never meant to incur. TJ sat on his bed, flexing his fingers in front of his face, imagining existence, taking up space. The conscious effort to flex his fingers and process that he was indeed flexing his fingers. Imagining all that, snatched away. Lizards and bugs and pet dogs were one thing, but a human, a child no less. Despite all the death surrounding his life, including that of infant Robbie, TJ thought back to the one other time he had gotten up close and personal with it. Hey, he had asked Nina one day walking home from school. Want to see a dead guy? Nina stopped dead in her tracks.
What?
I found one, TJ whispered, that sideways slash returning to his face. A corpse. He's been there for days. Nina had appeared hesitant, but she remained silent as TJ quickened his pace and approached a bridge overlooking a creek. He was excited to finally show it off to someone who could appreciate it as much as he did, someone who could understand. When he reached the guardrails, he meandered off the road and down an embankment, Nina lagging behind. Look, he breathed. Look. The body laid face down in the mud directly underneath the bridge, its toes trailing into the creek water. It was pale and purplish from rot, but not yet broken down. From their angle, they could see a full beard, long scraggly hair, and skin that wasn't too wrinkly or liver-spotted. The man couldn't have been older than 35 when he died. I wonder what got him, TJ mused. Overdosed, maybe. Guy looks a bit young to be keeling over from any ailments.
This is sick.
Nina whispered. I know, it is pretty sick, TJ laughed.
No, I mean it's sick. You're sick.
Nina snapped, backing away from him, up towards the road. TJ wheeled towards her. What? I thought you liked this stuff. Nina shook her head, continuing to scurry up the embankment. When she hit the road, she turned and fled, back in the direction of the school. Nina! He called. Nina!
Get lost!
Her distant voice shouted back.
Creep! Loser creep!
When TJ went to check on the body the next day after school, he saw vehicular tracks and boot prints marring the ground near the embankment. The corpse was gone. Nina proceeded to avoid eye contact with him for the rest of their time in school. TJ lacked the nerve to try and talk to her again. And last he heard, Nina had dropped the goth persona and found a job in marketing. Of course, only years later did TJ realize the truth. She was a fucking poser. TJ dwelled on all this as the sun rose, filling his room with a tired golden glow. But he didn't feel the least bit sleepy. Are you a fucking poser too? He asked himself. No, you're not some wannabe damaged soul or whatever. You are death. She said it. And of course, the irony of killing a child within a Freddy Fazbear restaurant was not lost on him. Christ, he realized. I'm going to become him. But as far as he knew, they had never caught him. Sure, there had been rumors, but nothing leading up to a solid conviction. If he could pull this off, if he could become a master of death, and conquer that little firecracker Vanessa next. Raw sugar pumped through his veins. He became jittery, running his hands through his hair. Breathe, he told himself. And think. He needed a plan. And he had all day before his next shift to form one. He was in luck. He found out through his Fazwatch there would be a kid's birthday party at the Pizzaplex later that evening. TJ showed up to work early, around 6:30 p.m. Strolling through the glass front doors, he popped his hood up, melding with the streaming crowds of parents and kids and teenagers. He deliberately refrained from clocking in. No sense in leaving a digital footprint around a hypothetical crime scene. Slipping into a nearby bathroom, he changed into his nightguard uniform and activated his Fazwatch. The schedule on the watch told him the kids' party was at Monty's Gator Golf. TJ had never wandered in that direction. Mini-golf wasn't his thing. The last time he played, the amount of water hazard penalties he racked up nearly put his score in the triple digits. Regardless, he sauntered across the ground floor towards the attraction's entrance. He had to admit the aesthetic was impressive. A glowing green marquee overlooking a forest of plastic mangroves and oak trees, the color scheme that of the titular animatronic gators. Of the glam rocks, Monty was probably his favorite. His brash, showboating personality appealed to his own rock star pipe dreams. Of course, by some cosmic miracle, if TJ's own musical ambitions ever took off, he hoped he wouldn't be performing for a bunch of kids playing mini-golf. As he approached the entrance, he paused, eyeing the security camera mounted on the ceiling above it. His eyes narrowed. Not a trace. Adopting a casual air, he turned his back on the camera and pretended to scratch his wrist. Certain no one was watching, he accessed his Fazwatch and connected with the camera ID. Peering out the side of his eye, he triggered the motion controls. The camera turned at a glacial pace, but soon was facing away from him. Then it was pointing directly at the wall behind it. TJ slipped through the entrance with a line of guests, disconnecting from the camera. He was in. Rockabilly music and alligator sound effects blared through the room, matched in volume only by the chittering, screaming kids running roughshod across the course. If TJ were on the clock, he might have found the resolve to reprimand them, but he had other work to do tonight. Ignoring the frenetic activity around him, he enacted part 1 of his plan. He located a towel room in one of the side corridors. Yes, they needed a towel room on account of the number of kids jumping into the water to retrieve their balls, and stuffed an armful into a laundry cart. Then he rolled the cart out onto the main floor, scanning the room for any large congregations of kids. He spotted them near the gift shop. The birthday boy's party hat stood out like a dunce cap. Avoiding eye contact, he rolled the cart near them, locating the party cove nearest to them, a small alcove with beanbag chairs and tables and green curtains. TJ glanced back at them. The kids appeared distracted with some shiny new toy the birthday boy was showing off. He nestled the laundry cart behind a set of curtains. Then he was next to follow. Secluded in the dark, the smell of canvas and mildew his only company, he fidgeted and breathed through his teeth. His hands itched with anticipation. He was really gonna do it. He was really gonna break that seal. For one of those little squirts, the next hour or so would be their last. Snot-nosed brats, he thought, recalling their obnoxious behavior back at the atrium gushing over the band. One little soul wouldn't be missed. He knew he'd be relieving some poor adult couple of their burden. He knew his own mother wouldn't have given a damn. She was no exception. The mask was just off with her. Oh shit, he muttered, snapping out of it. The kids had migrated over to the party cove. TJ held his breath, although there was no way these hyperactive children would hear him. They pushed each other and ran in circles, playing some limp, unfocused form of tag. This generation's doomed, TJ thought. Then the kids inexplicably stopped, pointing at something to their left and cheering. TJ peered through a gap in the curtains and saw Montgomery Gator stride into view, wielding his bass guitar. The animatronic stomped on the ground and broke into song, playing a slew of power chords and belting Happy Birthday in his garbled Cajun-accented voice. The kids sang along, or rather, shouted off-key, while the birthday boy looked around sheepishly. Monty's stomach hatch opened up and a green and purple birthday cake emerged, a platform lowering it onto the table. The kids cheered and gathered around, a Pizzaplex staffer appearing with a cake cutter and plates. As the kids were served, Monty straightened up and scanned the cove. His eyes settled right on TJ's hiding spot. "Fuck," TJ hissed. The reptile emitted a low rumble, his sunglasses mechanically lowering down his snout. Those bulbous plastic eyes seemed to stare right through the curtains, seeing through every lie and dark intent in TJ's body.
"Hey, nobody likes a party pooper,"
he growled, stepping towards the curtains. The staffer and the kids were too preoccupied with the cake to notice. "Shit!" TJ spat, backing further into the darkness. If Monty pulled back the curtains and exposed him, his plans would be ruined. Think, come on!" he shouted in his mind, grasping his hair. His Fazwatch lit up near his face. As Monty reached for the gap in the curtains, TJ scrolled through the touchscreen, finding an IP address labeled Gator23. "Connect!" he said out loud, jabbing a button. Monty froze. His green metal claw remained grasped on the curtain, which was parted slightly by his toothy jaws. His robot eyes were blank and unstaring. TJ's heart stampeded in his chest as his breathing slowed. "Holy fucking shit, that was way too close," he breathed, approaching the inert alligator. "Monty, what are you doing?" a child's voice from beyond the curtain asked. TJ suddenly got an idea. "Kids, Monty's gonna put on a bit of a show for you," he muttered, scrolling through a list of programs on the watch and selecting one. Monty twitched, the sunglasses flying back on his muzzle.
"Rock and roll!"
He flung himself backwards, flailing his arms and gnashing his jaws. TJ couldn't see the full extent of the show, but from the sounds of it, a few beanbag chairs had been torn, the table had been knocked aside, and panicking kids were running around like headless chickens. The very floor shook, and Monty's voice reverberated in TJ's chest as he sang some beefy 80s rock ballad. Kids surged back and forth in front of the gap in the curtain. TJ stalked forward. "Monty, stop the song!" the staffer was commanding. "Skip! Pause! Show's over! Help! Anyone?" All the kids were glued onto the raging reptile as he stomped out of the party cove and into the golf course, busting down a railing, still belting out his song. One kid backed right into the curtains. TJ took a deep breath. His fingers flexed. His heart jumped to his throat. Like plucking an apple from the tree. In a flash, his arms shot out from the gap and wrapped around the kid's chest, pulling him into the darkness. "Ah! Hey! What the—" But TJ clapped a hand over his mouth. The kid's voice went muffled and he struggled, scratching TJ's arms and kicking forwards. TJ backed further into the gloom, his other arm locking the kid's neck in a blood choke. "Hush!" TJ breathed. He squeezed with all his might. The kid writhed and lurched, his heels digging into TJ's shins. He seethed and held on. He could smell the kid's cheap shampoo and grimy sweat. His heart raced. He could feel it bursting from his chest, knocking against the back of the kid's skull. "Holy fucking shit," he whispered. "That's wild." He tightened his grip. His bicep and forearm crushed the kid's neck. He imagined his stupid head popping off from the pressure. A new scent hit his nose, indicating that the kid had wet himself. "Die. Just fucking die." The kid gave a stifled cry. He tried biting TJ's palm, but the pain only forced him to squeeze tighter and tighter. "I said die." The struggling stopped. The kid's arms went limp and his legs failed. TJ realized he was holding him up with nothing but his own strength. It had felt like an eternity. But it was over. Almost too quickly. For the first time in his life, he had killed another human being. And it had been easy. Scary at first, but ultimately easy. It was even easier in the dark to dump the gangly load into the laundry cart and cover it with a few towels. TJ exited the curtains, pushing the cart with his head down and expression blank. Everyone's attention was still on Monty, now surrounded by a cabal of Pizzaplex staffers. Unnoticed, he exited Monty's Gator Golf and wheeled the cart back to the front doors. It was 8:59 p.m. Time to clock in. In the labyrinthine depths of the Pizzaplex basement, TJ found the door labeled Water Pumps. He brought the cart to a stop outside it, confirmed he was alone, then sent Vanessa a message on his Fazwatch. "It's done. By the water pumps like you said." He waited, wringing his clammy hands together. The watch pinged.
Perf. I'll handle it. Go back to your shift.
TJ made an odd grunting noise. What did she mean by that? Was she going to fulfill her end of the deal? Had he done this heinous deed for nothing? Shut up, he told himself. That's just your limitations talking. He trudged up the basement to make his way to the first floor. As families and young couples on the ground floor headed for the exit, TJ glanced around for any signs of trouble, whispering concerned expressions or perhaps huddled groups of staffers. But it might have been another night at the Pizzaplex. Things were drawing to a close. The staffers cleaning up and breaking down, the guests' bellies full and pockets empty, as they departed only to inevitably return the next day. They have no idea, TJ realized with a rush as he ascended to the first floor. I got away with it. Obviously, someone would find out the kid was missing, but he was certain he'd covered his tracks fairly well. And if Fazbear Entertainment's decades-long reputation of resilience despite murder and corporate negligence held up, the whole thing would be brushed under the rug within days. A simple write-off. Another thread in the tapestry of urban legend. The first floor was empty by the time TJ donned his flashlight and began his patrol. He stole glimpses at the higher levels for Vanessa, but there was no sign of her above. She's getting ready. Doing whatever she's gonna do. A nervous heat gnawed in his guts. And then we're gonna... Yes. She had appeared receptive, eager even, to the prospect of carnal relations. TJ slicked his hair into place, feeling it was still messy from the struggle behind the curtains. Time passed. The night dragged on. The nervous heat had become a feverish fire. TJ's hands shook and his chest tightened. He nearly jumped out of his skin when a voice boomed over the speakers.
Freddy Fazbear's Mega Pizzaplex is now closed. Initiating nighttime protocols.
Midnight, he said, checking his watch for any missed messages. Where are you, Vanessa? But another hour passed. TJ's feet ached from pacing the same route dozens of times. The heat was dying away, and his breathing went shallow and constricted. Don't tell me you let me down, he growled, swinging his flashlight like a blade. Don't tell me you're a fucking poser too. I killed tonight, bitch. I'll do worse to you. The ping of his Fazwatch was like a gun going off. TJ inhaled and checked the notification.
Female employee lockers. Leave your uniform outside.
His pallid face stung from the force of his blush. His fingers trembled as he typed back a reply. On my way. The Pizzaplex became a neon blur as he strode up to the second floor. Not too quickly, though. He didn't want to appear eager. The pictures in his mind, the boiling passion in his blood. It made his head spin. Upon reaching the entrance to the locker rooms, he noticed the cameras were all turned away. You clever girl, he thought, slipping inside. The door snapped shut behind him. Burgundy lockers lined the sanitized floors. The whole space smelled of familiar locker room odors. Mildew, bleach, linens, ammonia. Vanessa wasn't in sight. Still, TJ undid his tie and shirt, letting them fall to his feet. His shoes and black pants were next to follow, and soon he was fully exposed, his bare skin chilly in the cold air. It wouldn't be that way for long. Vanessa, he called, stepping forward. He turned a corner, past more lockers, and found himself in the shower area, rows of tiled cubicles behind opaque curtains. He slowly scanned them, watching for any signs of occupation.
TJ?
A woman's voice called. "Hey," he replied.
You really came through.
The voice said. It came from the shower stall at the far end.
And a promise is a promise. I've laid down my suit. You can see me for who I am underneath.
"I bet it's a glorious sight," said TJ, his voice small. He approached the furthest stall. "I left my suit at the door, just like you said,"
Perfect.
said Vanessa.
Now I can let you in.
TJ could see her, a milky shadow behind the curtain, seemingly caught in a slow, fluid whirl. She was dancing. "I'm ready," TJ breathed. His fingers stroked the curtain. He grabbed hold, pulled them back, and nearly screamed. Within the shower was some creature, an anthropomorphic rabbit, its slender feminine body marred with stitches and loose threads. Its face was stretched into a psychotic grin, buck teeth like razors, whiskers like stiff black wires. And its huge cat-like eyes were glowing, piercing red, portals to some hellish underworld that paralyzed him and stole his breath.
Are you lost, little boy?
Its voice was garbled and perverted, seeming to emanate from a fuzzy radio in TJ's mind. Its mouth was unmoving. The whole thing was a costume. The... His voice died. His lips went numb. His mouth dried up. It tasted sour and sharp like bile.
My. This is most improper.
The rabbit lady teased, wagging her finger.
You'd better put that thing away, young man.
"What the fuck, Vanessa?" TJ spat, cringing backwards, his skin breaking out in clamminess, his heart sloshing in his stomach.
You will call me Vanny,
The rabbit lady proclaimed.
and we will have such fun together. Oh, yes, we will.
Vanny reached for the shower handle.
How about a hot shower? Just the two of us.
She twisted the handle, and every shower head in the room went off. A torrential downpour of scalding, red-tinted water. TJ finally let out a yell, staggering away as a red tide sloshed over his feet. The room suddenly stank of iron. Blood, he realized, gagging. He instantly knew whose blood it was. Vanny pirouetted under the shower head, arms held out like a reveler, her white fur staining red. A wickedly long kitchen knife had appeared in her paw. Her eyes locked on TJ, two burning orbs through a crimson shower.
Become reborn in blood.
She approached. TJ ran. His screams ricocheted off the walls like a caged bat. He slipped in puddles of bloodied water, splashing it over his skin, his eyes into his mouth. He fell on his stomach, sliding across the floor. He scrambled to get up, and the murderous rabbit lady was keeping pace, skipping merrily through the blood, her knife glinting silver and ruby. Pinkish steam filled the room as TJ barreled for the door. He grabbed blindly at his clothes, snatching up an indistinct bundle, then burst out into the hallway, stark naked, his clothes pressed to his waist as he sprinted across the Pizzaplex floor. The AC was an arctic blast on his wet, reeking skin. The purple lights pulsed in a rhythmic beat, in time with the blood pumping through the capillaries in his eyes. And somewhere behind him, Vanny was laughing. The rest was a blur, jumping down the stairs and rolling his ankle, bursting out an employee's side door into the freezing night, hobbling across the interminable parking lot to his car, never dipping below 80 miles per hour the whole way home. And even as he screeched to a stop in his driveway and limped to the front door, Vanny's laugh never left his head. TJ stayed awake through the night again. He hadn't slept in over 48 hours. He could still taste steamed blood in his mouth. Every time his eyelids drifted shut, her devilish leporine face etched itself into the gloom. I fucked up. Oh God, I fucked up royally. The rising sun offered no respite. He felt violated, like pounds of his flesh had been cleaved off his bones. His sickness had been exploited. He had committed a grievous act against another human being, all for what? Slaking his lust? The mystery of the red door? He knew he'd seen enough. Clearly Vanessa was using whatever lied beyond that door to convene with her other half, the psychotic, murderous Vanny. Freaking figures, he thought, that the one person who could relate to me would be more fucked up in the head. He cursed the cunning simplicity of Vanessa's plan. Get some loser creep to do her dirty work, saddling him with the risk of going down with her if he spoke up. And now this demon was loose, enabled by him, and who knows what she would do with him now that he'd fulfilled his vile, pathetic purpose. God damn it! He cried, pounding the mattress with his fist. What did Vanny want with dead kids? What drove her to kill? Something more was going on. TJ could easily picture the costume in his mind, twisted with laughter, blood spattered and hideously stitched. Everything was too elaborate. It was unlikely a girl like Vanessa had brought on this murderous split personality by herself. He had to know what was beyond that red door now. His skin broke out in itching. He scratched and scratched until his nails wore down and ragged white and red lines marked his body. He tried reclining, but everything stung. So he stood up and paced, leaving worn-out circles in his carpet. He had to do something. He had to lay this monster to rest. And he had to do it alone. Fortunately, TJ didn't see a single police car on his way to the Pizzaplex that evening. Sleep deprivation had rendered his driving into a slow, lane-veering mess. He practically spilled out of his front door as he parked, rising tiredly to his feet. His nightguard uniform was wrinkly, and it stank of body odor. At least he had gotten the flecks of blood off of it. No trace of that kid left, anywhere. TJ attracted odd looks from guests and staffers as he slouched his way up to the first floor. He was certain he resembled a zombie fresh from the grave. But although his body was sore, his eyes watery, his hair a matted catastrophe, his insides strained with nerves and fear, he hadn't given an iota of thought to what he was going to do later that night. What would he say to Vanessa? How would he get access to the red door? What would he do if the knife-wielding rabbit lady rose again? He was walking off a cliff, Vanny goading him on. And standing in his path was another kink in his plans. "Tyler," Mr. Greasebag said, holding out his hand. "Real quick." TJ sighed and shambled over to Mr. Greasebag, realizing with a start he never got the man's real name. He squinted blarily at his name tag. Something Hansen. "Tyler, I'm sure you've heard by now," Mr. Hansen grumbled. "Heard what?" TJ asked. His fatigue made his guise of innocence convincing enough. "Some kid never went home with the rest of the party last night," said Mr. Hansen, lowering his voice. "We're thinking he got lost in the Pizzaplex. Or worse," he added ominously. "Oh shit," said TJ. "What do you mean by worse?" "Got himself hurt or killed below decks," said Mr. Hansen. "You get a bit too far from all the colors and lights, suddenly you're in the frickin' steam tunnels." As Mr. Hansen blabbered on, TJ's attention was drawn to a little girl standing by a door 20 feet behind him, a Glamrock Bonnie balloon in her hand. She appeared lost herself, peering around with a doleful look. "I mean, it happened when I was a kid," Mr. Hansen chuckled. "Some idiot broke into the steam tunnels and they found his corpse wrapped around a pipe. Guy must have thought it was a parkour gym or something." TJ forced himself to laugh. Then something behind Mr. Hansen flickered with movement. TJ saw a security camera mounted on the ceiling near the girl. And as he watched, it began to swivel. It turned more and more, imperceptibly, until it was pointing at the wall behind it. "Oh fuck no." "Another thing," Mr. Hansen said, jolting him back to attention. "You never clocked out last night. Vanessa said she never saw you leave, but a side door was left open. Was that you?" The door behind the little girl eased open. "Tyler!" Mr. Hansen barked, snapping his fingers. "Sorry," said TJ, refocusing. "I wasn't thinking. I just thought we could leave through those doors." "Uh-huh," said Mr. Hansen, nodding sarcastically. "You look like crap, Tyler. Did you sleep in your uniform last night? Did you sleep at all?" A pair of white furry paws emerged from behind the door, reaching for the girl. "I haven't been feeling well," Tyler answered, his voice utterly disconnected from his mouth. He twitched his lips, widened his eyes past Mr. Hansen's shoulder, trying to signal the girl, urging her to run. "Tyler!" The pause lingered, almost as if they were savoring what was about to happen. "Tyler!" Mr. Hanson jabbed him in the shoulder. "You're not fit to work tonight. Go home. You're on leave until you can get some sleep and clean yourself up." "Okay, fine," TJ snapped. "Sorry. Really, I'm sorry." "Go home," Mr. Hanson said, glaring. "Vanessa will cover your shift. She can handle it." TJ nodded, stepping away and turning around. But he shot one last glance at the door behind Mr. Hanson. It had shut. The girl was gone. And a single Glamrock Bonnie balloon was floating aimlessly up to the ceiling. "God, no," he breathed. But Mr. Hanson continued to stare daggers at him. TJ nearly tripped over himself as he descended to the ground floor, then broke into a run when he hit the entrance. "I did this," he thought, staring at the Pizzaplex's massive silhouetted facade from the parking lot. "Vanessa learned admin mode from me. It should have been just one insignificant soul for a lifetime of pleasure and self-satisfaction. Every one of his dark fantasies realized, to make him the Grim Reaper, master of death. Now he had nothing. Instead, in its place, there was a walking plague hunting down children in Freddy Fazbear's mega Pizzaplex. He felt betrayed, hunted, diminished, and demeaned. It all brewed and rose up from his stomach like vomit. He needed some time alone, away from the Pizzaplex. Maybe then, he could finally get some sleep. He was mistaken. The house was dark by the time TJ walked through the front door. His mother was never a night owl. Bedtime for her was usually right after supper. Nevertheless, TJ treaded as lightly as he could through the kitchen. Already his eyelids drooped with drowsiness. He almost felt relief, knowing that he might, finally, be able to drift off and recharge. The light snapped on. TJ yelped, blinded by the harsh whiteness, a dull pain erupting in his head.
"What's going on with you?"
TJ squinted at the kitchen table. His mother was sitting there, arms and legs crossed, still in her day clothes, a coffee mug on the table near her.
"Tyler James, you've been acting funny all day today and all day yesterday, and now you're home early from work. Did something happen over there?"
"No," TJ muttered.
"You're a terrible liar, Tyler."
She sneered.
"Did you get fired already?"
"No,"
"Why don't you talk to me, Tyler?"
his mother said.
"You've kept so much from me all these years. I never know what's going on in that head of yours. Now talk to me."
It was more a demand, less an earnest attempt at maternal bonding. Nonetheless, TJ sat down in the chair next to her, staring at the ground.
"Don't get all tight-lipped with me now,"
she continued.
"This is the price you pay for living rent-free in my house. I'm going to treat you like my son, even if it means making you talk. Now talk."
TJ glared at her. She glared right back, her yellow eyes slits peeking out from a bronzed, wrinkled face, adorned with a crown of frizzy, blondish-gray hair. "I can't say, Mom," was all he could muster.
"Then try,"
she replied. TJ rubbed the sleep out of his eyes. His thoughts felt behind by several minutes. He attempted to quell the pressure in his guts and speak past it. "I did something really bad, Mom. I thought it would give me something I wanted. But it didn't. It made things worse. Now there's something beyond my control out there that I never intended. It's doing worse things now, and I have to stop it alone. No one can find out."
"What did you do?"
his mother pressed. "That's not important," TJ snapped. "Someone or something is running around killing people now because of me."
"I asked what you did,"
she said through gritted teeth. TJ eyed her grimly. "You really want to know? Like I said, it's not important."
"Tell me."
He inhaled. "I killed someone." His mother leaned back in her chair.
"You killed someone? On accident?"
"No. It was deliberate. I wanted him dead, so I did it. She continued to look at him, as one skeptically regards a stranger. The silence between them was like a train roaring through the tiny kitchen. Then she shook her head. A strained smile crossed her face.
I knew it. I knew this whole time.
What? TJ said. What do you mean by that?
That you were capable of it. Killing another human being.
What are you talking about? TJ yelled, standing up, his chair toppling over. I didn't kill that guy under the bridge. I just found him like that. Or are you talking about that dog? His mother broke out into hysterical laughter.
What are you talking about? Do you not remember? You were 6 at the time, so maybe you don't.
Mom, what the fuck? TJ cried. What are you referring to? But the answer seemed to grow from his intestines and spike through his lungs. You're full of it, he challenged. Robbie died from whooping cough. That's what you told me.
No,
she said, shaking her head again.
That's what I told myself. But Robbie's blanket was on the floor that morning, and the doctors told me the signs were more consistent with suffocation. Someone did it to him, and it definitely wasn't me or your father.
You're lying, TJ sputtered.
I see the truth more than ever now,
she yelled, standing up herself.
Your father tried telling me, but I didn't listen. That's why he left, you know. He knew our son was a murdering psychopath, and he was right.
She laughed again, her eyes tearing up.
Did his coughing bother you that much? Did you think what you did was a mercy?
Shut up! TJ shouted, flailing his fists. Shut up!
You've always been a sick, murdering thing, Tyler James, and now you're through.
She pulled out her cell phone and dialed.
I should have done this long ago. Then we could have at least had a few more nice things in this world.
Don't you dare! TJ warned. I have to stop Vanny! She held the phone to her ear, walking away from the kitchen table. TJ roared. He grabbed the coffee mug and swung at his mother's neck. It shattered into a dozen pieces. Only the broken, jagged handle remained in his grasp. The phone slipped from his mother's hand, cracking on the tile floor. She choked. Her other hand leapt to her throat. A fountain of redness seeped between the gaps in her fingers. She fell to her knees, then slumped onto her side. TJ could see the ceramic shard jutting just under her chin, an ivory protrusion surrounded by bright, gushing blood. Again. He had done it again. TJ watched the blood seep across the floor. It licked the tips of his shoes. Then he threw his head up to the heavens and screamed. It was 3 a.m. by the time TJ had found the resolve to get the hell out of the house, back to his car, and speed back towards the Pizzaplex. Again, the speedometer never dipped below 80. It was all a lie. He was never a master of death, a grim reaper, whatever self-indulgent lies Vanessa, or Vanny, had planted in his head. He was lower than dirt. He was a destructive, foul, microbial parasite, leaving a trail of death in his wake. How important he thought of himself. How above everyone else. How he thought he'd grasped the forbidden truths of this world, molded the concepts of life and death in his hands like clay. With everything crashing down upon him, he was a dead man walking. His fate in the eyes of the world had been sealed. But that didn't mean he couldn't try and pull off one last glorious feat before that happened. Only one more will die tonight. Take away the knife and Vanny was just a skinny girl in a rabbit costume. It would take little to break her. If that was the extent of carnal pleasure TJ would reap from her, it would have to do. He only slowed when he hit the parking lot. No sense in alerting Vanny with the rumble of an angry engine. He parked along the side of the massive complex, striding to the same door he had escaped from the night before. Access granted, he chuckled to himself, using his Fazwatch to activate the card reader. Inside the Pizzaplex seemed just as mellow and uneventful as TJ had remembered from his first nights on the job. Same muted purple glow, same soft music piping through speakers. But now the atmosphere was heavy, polluted with the spilled blood of children. How many more kids had Vanny taken earlier in the evening? The thought sent a shiver down his spine. The whole place was a killing field, one whose gates he had thrown wide open for Vanny. He made his way across the desolate atrium and up to the second floor. His first stop would be the red door. Inevitably, Vanny would come back to it. Maybe he could get her while she slipped out of the costume. A surprise tackle, a chokehold. It would be over in minutes. Roxy Raceway once more spread out before him. He peered around for its namesake, but the half-constructed racetrack appeared just as desolate. His relief curdled into dread when he remembered that Vanny could use her Fazwash to control the animatronics as well. If she could recruit a squadron of killer robots. He shooed away the thought and made his way west, towards where he remembered the red door was. He could almost feel his own vision tunneling, laser focus on his last great misdeed, liberating the Pizzaplex and himself of the scourge of
Help!
TJ froze. The call was distant, from one of the area's many far ends, but he had definitely heard it. A child's voice.
Please, she took me.
Oh fuck, he whispered, peering around. Where?
I'm hurt. Please.
It was coming from the opposite end of the raceway. TJ bared his teeth, running his hands through his hair. You have a goal. Don't divert from it. But some foreign pull in his chest forced him towards the child's voice. Oh God, please tell me I'm not growing a conscience now. Fine, I'll go, he grumbled to himself, wheeling around and breaking into a run.
I'm hurt real bad.
I'm coming, TJ huffed. If he saved the child, that meant one less potential victim for Vanny, or maybe bait to lure the rabbit lady out. He would get there when he got there. The voice was coming from the Glamrock Beauty Salon, a small building near the main entrance topped with a massive gear and a scaled-up pair of scissors. TJ tried the front doors. Locked. Screw it, he said, picking up the nearest trash can and hurling it at the glass. It tore through it like it was made of paper, sending a glittering shower onto the floor within the salon. TJ stepped over the carnage and assessed the dimly lit room. Hey! Hello! Where are you at? The kid's voice cried from the back. TJ strode past shelves and salon chairs and arrived at the far wall, occupied by a rack of Roxy-themed bedazzled shirts. Kid? He called. The voice said. It was tinny, as if emanating from a vent. TJ narrowed in on the source. Next to the clothing rack was a laundry chute, big enough for even him to step into. Christ, he muttered. Any child could have taken a tumble and fallen 20 feet down to the first floor laundry room. He walked up to the chute and poked his head in. Hey! He shouted. You down there? Only an echo of his own voice answered. He called again. No response. He growled in frustration. He was 100% certain the voice had come from the laundry chute. He turned on his Fazwatch and set the brightness to max. He leaned over the precipice, aiming his wrist down below. That's when something sounded off behind him. TJ whipped around, face to face with whom he expected to be Vanny, but instead he saw a hulking orange mass, then the bow tie and top hat.
Murderer!
Glamrock Freddy roared before pushing him with all his strength. TJ met open air and darkness. The salon was a shrinking pane of light above him. The breath jumped from his lungs as he fell feet first, bouncing off the metal walls of the laundry chute. 1 second, 2 seconds, and he made contact. His feet shattered, his kneecaps cracked in half, his legs folded up, trapping him in a fetal position at the bottom. TJ's shrieks of agony rattled the chute. He felt it not in his legs, which were twisted and broken beyond use, but his tailbone, his spine, every nerve in his thorax screaming for deliverance from the pain. The only other light source was the glow of his Fazwatch, but even that was diminishing. The pain racked him, beating him senselessly, until, eventually, he blacked out. TJ awoke to a pair of burning eyes staring into his soul. She had opened the hatch to the laundry chute. TJ stared hazily as she put a paw to her mouth in mock surprise, then gave a dainty little wave. "Get the fuck away from me," he wheezed. Vanny reached in and hooked her hands under TJ's shoulders. TJ groaned as the pain flared again. She dragged him from the chute, letting his swollen, limp legs flop about in sickening angles. Then, with inhuman strength, she dumped him into a laundry cart. TJ's spine gave one more agonizing twinge. "Fuck you, bitch," he grimaced. But Vanny only pressed a finger to her gaping lips in a shushing motion. Then she pushed the cart. The wheels squeaked maddeningly. The frame shuddered under his weight. He couldn't tell where she was going. All he could see above the rim of the cart was her psychotic black grin and glowing red eyes bobbing with glee. But he was sure he knew where she was taking him. It was too much. He blacked out again. When he came around for the final time, he wished he'd stayed unconscious. He didn't recognize the room he was in. Everything was decrepit and filthy. But it was old. Old diner-style floor and tables. Vintage wallpapers peeling off. Posters from Freddy's restaurants past, their colors long faded. The air was cold and musty. TJ somehow knew he was underground. Through the red door. He quickly realized he'd been chained to a chair. He lacked the strength to struggle. All he could do was look around and nearly gag at the obscenity of the scene. He was seated at one of the dining tables, surrounded by guests. The corpses of 5 children, their throats slit open, dried blood caking their fronts. They too had been chained to chairs, held upright with strips of rebar, party hats haphazardly placed on their lifeless heads. TJ hyperventilated as he recognized at least 2 of them, the girl from earlier that evening, the one who had lost her balloon, and the boy he had snatched 2 days ago. He was the most bloodless of them all. TJ knew, all too well, why. On the table in front of them sat a cheap porcelain teapot and a stack of teacups, each decorated with a different Freddy's mascot. TJ retched, nausea exploding in his stomach.
How quaint.
The rabbit lady sashayed out from behind TJ's chair, circling the table.
Who doesn't love a tea party? Especially good little rabbits like me.
She distributed the cups, clinking them loudly and chipping off little bits. She poured from the teapot. The liquid inside was a bit too thick and dark to be tea.
But of course, who are we to ignore the guest of honor?
She turned her ever-smiling face towards TJ.
This party's for you, after all. Without you, none of this would have been possible.
She clapped, hopping in place. TJ retched again.
What, are we all asleep?
She simpered. She drew her knife and sauntered behind the corpse directly across from TJ.
Let's put on a happy face for good old TJ.
Her blade slipped into the kid's limp mouth and sliced up through his left cheek like it were butter. Then the right cheek. The kid's new smile glistened in the subterranean light. "Vanessa," TJ breathed. "Vanessa, please."
Well, I'll be. None of you have taken a sip of your tea.
Vanny complained, hands on her hips.
I'm offended. See if I ever host a party again.
She grabbed a chair to the left of the smiling child and toppled it over with a sickeningly loud crash. TJ could barely see the kid's arms sprawled to the side. "Vanessa," TJ blurted. "Please, stop this."
I told you to call me Vanny.
Vanny chided, striding over to him. She placed a paw under his chin.
Vanessa is too old-fashioned, too proper. Vanny is cute and fun, just like me.
"This isn't you, Vanessa," said TJ. "I know you're there underneath that suit. Don't you remember?" He winced at the light emanating from her eyes. "We were night guards. We sang karaoke together. We shared secrets."
Oh, now you're just making things up,
she said, shoving his head away.
That's not very fun.
"You're not real," TJ spat. Vanny hesitated. Then she buried her knife into his shoulder. TJ screamed, straining against his chains. The pain was searing. He could feel the blade scrape against his collarbone.
Why are you crying, little baby?
Vanny mocked.
It's not real after all.
She picked up the teapot and hurled it against the wall.
Spoil sport, party pooper, buzzkill. We were having such a good time, then you had to go put a big stupid damper on everything.
Tears ran down TJ's cheeks. He could sense his impending doom like black electricity in the air. All for nothing. It was truly all for nothing.
You really need to change your attitude.
She growled, reaching under the table.
Maybe you should put on a happy face.
TJ gasped, expecting her to draw another knife, but it was a mask identical to hers, big enough only to cover the face.
Once you see things my way,
said Vanny, lifting the mask over his head.
Things will start making a little more sense.
Vanessa, what are you doing? TJ pleaded. Stop this! I know you're in there!
Hush, little baby, don't say a word.
She sang, lowering the mask.
Vanny's gonna buy you a mockingbird.
Vanessa! TJ sobbed.
And if that mockingbird don't sing,
she fixed the mask over his face.
Vanny's gonna stick a knife in everything.
TJ shook his head, trying to dislodge the mask, but it was stuck. Everything through the eye holes looked strange. Neon blue and purple, geometric lines and shapes like computer graphics. He tried to scream, but his voice came out in electronically garbled mess. And suddenly, the virtual world he was forced to see turned blood red. Another monstrous rabbit's face exploded into his vision, yellow, grinning with gleaming purple eyes. It strobed in and out of being. It opened its mouth and laughed. Something baritone and devoid of humanity, and TJ could see down its throat, a cavernous, fleshy maw that crawled with the despairing arms of swallowed children. TJ screamed until his throat tore apart. He seized in his chair, skull rattling with convulsions, and still the yellow rabbit laughed, and laughed, and laughed. Oh, what fun! They were all having so much fun! When Vanny removed the mask, TJ's head dipped downward. She grabbed a handful of his hair and lifted it back up, peering into his eyes. They were blank and laced with cataracts. There was nothing there. No sign of life. No sign of her master, either. She let his head fall to the side. She sighed. Failure. Dejected, no spring in her step, Vanny turned her back on the tea party of death and shambled to the back of the room, where sat a single, abandoned charging station. It was unoccupied, but if she got close enough, she'd be able to hear his voice. She pulled off her mask and let it drop to the ground.
I'm sorry.
Vanessa knelt before the charging station, head lowered in shame.
I did everything you said. I know I broke his mind. It just didn't work.
There was a long, gravid silence.
Fret not, little one.
The voice in her head was deep, husky, and guttural.
The fault is mine alone. It was my assumption that a brain hardwired for depravity would readily accept me.
He gave a slight laugh.
Not so much. It seems I cannot shovel more darkness into a mind already bursting with it.
So, what do we do now?
Vanessa asked.
Choose another,
said the voice.
But we must rethink our approach. We need someone whose mind is yet to be filled with anything. Someone unlearned.
You mean a child?
Vanessa offered.
Yes,
the voice pondered.
One of a particular tenacity, but impressionable, idealistic, so I can just slip in and take control.
I'll look out for one,
said Vanessa, placing a paw over her heart.
I promise.
My vicious little seraph, you will succeed in all that you do in my stead,
the voice assured.
Now stand.
She stood.
Let's get you back to baseline.
She exhaled.
Stay the course.
I will.
Focus on my voice.
I will.
Don't let anyone lead you astray.
I won't.
And when you find one, will you bring him to me?
She slipped the mask back over her head.
I will.
Hello again. I truly hope you enjoyed this narration of my original Tale from the Pizzaplex, Night of the Hare. This was a highly ambitious project that I could not have done without help, so I want to extend my gratitude to Rebecca Miller for her wonderfully wicked vocal performance as Vanessa/Vanny, and to my sister Abby for providing supplementary voices for the other female characters in this story. I also want to thank Sumizaki for, again, providing his amazing artwork for the visual element of this narration. It felt like old times again, me commissioning this dark, messed up FNaF art and him delivering in full. It's truly an honor to work with him. So a little background to this story. I started writing it before Ruin came out, back when glitchtrap was still a thing and the mimic didn't exist in the game's canonicity. So when Ruin came out, I was halfway through my story and I looked at it and I thought, you know what? I'm just gonna keep writing this the way I want to because I liked it before the mimic was a thing, back when glitchtrap and Vanny were the true main villains, and I truly hope I'm not the only one who thinks so. And finally, if you like what you've heard and you want to see more, you can check out my other FNaF narration, Denature of Things. And if you really want to support me, well, I am a published horror author. This is my novel, Hell's Gulf, an absurdist dark fantasy that I can only describe as Gravity Falls, but rated R and set in Florida. You can check out the link in the description below. There's a lot more to come for this channel, so as always, I will see you all next time.